Hello, I'm Serrin Foster, and it's my privilege to serve as president of Feminists for Life of America. And it's my honor to address you today. I want to thank our hosts. I want to thank all of you who identify as a feminist like me, and also those of you who say you're pro-life like me. Before we begin, I want you to know that I am not here to condemn women who have had abortions or those who participated in them. I know that there's much regret and there's so much hurt and anger. Instead, I'm here to help free women from abortion. All feminists do not support abortion. Properly defined, feminism is a philosophy that embraces the rights of all human beings without exception. And that means without regards to one's race, religions, one's sex, one's size, one's age, location, disability, or parentage. And feminism rejects the use of force to dominate, to control, or to destroy one another. And Feminists for Life continues a tradition by Mary Wollstonecraft, who in 1792 wrote a book that decried the sexual exploitation of women in a vindication of the rights of woman. In this book, she also condemned those who, and I quote, who would either destroy the embryo in the womb or cast it off once born, saying, nature in everything deserves respect, and those who violate her laws seldom violate them with impunity. Wollstonecraft died from complications following the birth of her second baby girl, and they named her Mary in her mother's honor. And like her mother, the younger Mary would become a great writer, producing one of the greatest novels ever to address the dangers of violating nature, Frankenstein, by Mary Wollstonecraft Goodwin Shelley. 50 years after Mary Wollstonecraft's book was published, Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton traveled to England to fight for the abolition of slavery. Barred from speaking at the 1840 Anti-World Slavery Convention simply because they were women, Mott and Stanton determined to hold a convention to advance the rights of women. At that time, American women could not hold a position on a jury. They couldn't hold property. They could not vote. You know that. They didn't control their own money if they were married or under the responsibility of a father. They didn't even testify on their own behalf. And women's rights to attend college or maintain child custody after divorce or spousal death were severely limited, and marital rape went unacknowledged. The early American feminists faced conditions similar to those of women in developing countries today. And like them, they were strongly opposed to abortion. Despite their own struggles, they believed in the worth of all human beings. As feminists, we are daughters and sons of abolitionists. The same women who fought for the rights of slaves to be free and women to vote also fought for the unborn to be born. Abortion was very common in the 1800s. Sarah Norton, who along with Susan B. Anthony, successfully argued admission for women to Cornell University, wrote in 1870. Child murderers practiced their profession without let or hindrance and opened infant butcheries unquestioned. Is there no remedy for this antenatal murder? Perhaps there will come a day to the need to protect the unborn. When a woman told her that suffrage was unnecessary because she and her husband were one, Kirk asked her what would become of her babies if her husband died or ceased to provide for them. And she starts writing about this. She starts going off on a tangent, and she asks, why doesn't somebody ask what has happened to the babies? Ask Madame Rastel and thousands of physicians, male and female, who've engaged in their work of destruction for years. Physicians who have graduated from our first medical colleges, physicians with high-sounding diplomas, whose elegant equipages stand in front of Fifth Avenue mansions, who pocket a big fee and a little bundle of flesh at the same time, and no one is the wiser, not even the husband in the host of instances. What will become of the babies? Did you ask? And you? Can you not see that the idea is to educate women so that they may become self-reliant, self-sustaining, and self-respected. The wheel is a big one, and it needs a big push and a push altogether, giving it an impulse that will keep it constantly revolving. And the first revolution must be female suffrage. God, speed the time for the sake of the babies. Little ones will then be welcome. Without known exception, the early American feminists condemned abortion in no uncertain terms. In the radical feminist newspaper, The Revolution, founder Susan B. Anthony and editor Elizabeth Cady Stanton refused to publish advertisements for what they called feticides and infanticides. Abortion was consistently referred murder. The early American feminists argued that women who had abortions were responsible for their actions, but that they resorted to abortion primarily because within families and throughout society, they lacked autonomy, financial resources, and emotional support. A passage in Susan B. Anthony's newspaper explains, guilty, yes, no matter what the motive, a love of ease, or a desire to save from suffering the unborn innocent. The woman is awfully guilty who commits the deed. It will burden her conscience in life. It will burden her soul in death. But oh, thrice guilty is he who drove her to the desperation which impelled her to the crime. Victoria Woodhull, the first woman to run for President of the United States of America, concurred. In her own newspaper, Woodhull and Claflin's Weekly, Woodhull wrote, "The rights of children, then as individuals, begin while yet they remain the fetus." Woodhull and her sister Tennessee Claflin declared that pregnancy is not a disease, but a beautiful office of nature. And Stanton, who did go on in 1848 to organize the first women's convention in Seneca Falls, New York, classified abortion as a form of, and I quote, infanticide, and referred to, and I quote, the murder of children either before or after birth. And she said, there must be a remedy for such a crying evil as this. We believe that the cause of all these abuses lies in the degradation of women. Some who begrudgingly admit that the early American feminists were anti-abortion have suggested that it was their stance that rose out of the Victorian attitudes about sex. And that's not true either. Elizabeth Cady Stanton shocked Victorian society by parading around in public, visibly pregnant. She raised a flag to celebrate the birth of a son. She celebrated womanhood. She wrote Susan B. Anthony about the birth of her daughter. Oh, there's another one among us for the cause, she celebrated. And she was in your face about her ability to have children. But like today's pro-life feminists, our feminist foremothers also recognized that all women do not need to bear children to share in the celebration of womanhood. Susan B. Anthony was once complimented by a man who said, she ought to have been a wife and mother. Anthony replied, sweeter even than to have had the joy of caring for children of my own has it been for me to help bring about a better state of things for mothers generally, so that their unborn little ones could not be willed away from them. The first female physicians opposed abortion too. Elizabeth Blackwell, who became the first woman in the United States of America to earn a medical degree, graduated at the top of her class. She penned in her diary, the impetus was her opposition to abortion. She wrote, the gross perversion and destruction of motherhood by the abortionist fills me with indignation that the honorable term female physician should be exclusively applied to those women who carried on the shocking trade seemed to be me a horror. It was an utter degradation of what might and should be a noble position for women. The courageous Charlotte Lozier, a physician who was applauded by the media, who refused to perform an abortion when a married man brought in his young mistress to her practice. Instead, she offered the young woman help, and she called the police when the man wouldn't leave, and then she caused his arrest. And the liberal Massachusetts paper, the Springfield Republican, praised her and is feminist for life. So do we. In the 1860s, there was a sisterhood of professional women that emerged. One of those who helped found the group was Dr. Anna Densmore, who drew attention to the unmet needs of women, resulting in, and I quote, the crime of abortion, now so frightfully prevalent. Like Dr. Lozier, Dr. Densmore urged people to, and I quote, stretch out a helping, saving hand in this direction, just like people today do to provide support for pregnant women and parents across this great country. And they seek help at thousands of pregnancy resource centers, and they visit also our website, our help site called womendeservebetter.com. In fact, this past year, we have helped 125,000 visitors, mostly pregnant women and primary caregivers, including students as well, mostly women who were seeking help to work, learn, live, and love better, especially during the pandemic. The Quaker teacher, Dr. Alice Bunker Stockham, asked, by what false reasoning does she convince herself that another life, still more dependent upon her for its existence, with equal rights and possibilities, has no claim upon her for protection? Consider Dr. Maria Montessori, most famously known as a pioneer in education. The first female Italian physician was nominated for the Nobel Prize 6 times and earned the French Legion of Honor. But less well known is that she became pregnant out of wedlock. She could have had an abortion, but instead, in 1897, she quietly and lovingly placed her son in foster care. He learned the truth as a teen, and from that point on, Maria and her nephew, Mario, became inseparable. And we cannot ignore a woman named Dr. Susan LaFlèche-Picotte, who was the first American Indian of either sex to earn a medical degree. With 2 sons of her own, she declared, motherhood is a privilege. There are so many others. Dr. Juliet Stillman Severance, Dr. Rachel Brooks Gleason. It makes sense. Who better than the early American feminists to reveal to another woman the amazing ability of her body as a newly formed human being grows inside of her? And years later, Susan B. Anthony passed her responsibility on for women's rights to the next generation, just as every one of us must also do at some point in our lives. At the turn of the century, one young woman named Alice Paul assumed leadership. Paul fought tirelessly for the passage of the 19th Amendment, which in 1920 finally guaranteed American adult women the right to vote. Much later in Alice Paul's life, she was asked by a friend what she thought of linking abortion to women's rights. The author of the original Equal Rights Amendment called abortion, and I quote, the ultimate in the exploitation of women. And she asked, how can we help and protect women by killing them as babies? As time has gone on, our movement has become more diverse and more international. The great 20th century civil rights leader, Fannie Lou Hamer, was forcibly sterilized by the government. She saw abortion as an extension of government's attempts against minorities, including the looming threat of compulsory abortions. And she declared, I think these children have a right to live, and I think these mothers have a right to support them in a decent way. We are dealing with human beings. Gracia Olivares, the first woman and Latina to graduate from Notre Dame School of Law, she declared, in this affluent country of ours, pregnant cattle and horses receive better care than pregnant poor women. The poor cry out for justice and equality, and we respond with legalized abortion. In 2004, Kenyan environmental and political activist and pro-life feminist Wangari Maathai was the first woman to receive a Nobel Peace Prize for her contribution to sustainable development, democracy, and peace. She said, "There is no reason why anybody who's been conceived shouldn't be given the opportunity to be born and to live a happy life." One of the most inspiring pro-life leaders on the world stage was assassinated in 2009, and I will never forget the moment that I learned of her passing. For years, Pakistani Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto would speak for women and their baby girls. She wrote, "Too often, when a woman expects a girl, she abets her husband in abandoning or aborting that innocent, perfectly formed child. As we gather here today, the cries of the girl child reach out to us, and decades later, they are still crying out for us to help them." Abortion betrays the basic feminist principles of nonviolence, non-discrimination, and justice for all. Abortion is a reflection that we have not met the needs of women and that women have settled for less. Women deserve better than abortion. More than a century ago, these same women who fought for the rights of slaves to be free, who fought for the rights of women to vote, also fought for women and children to be protected from abortion. And we continue their work in the spirit of Maddie Brinkerhoff, who wrote in 1869 in The Revolution, "When a man steals to satisfy hunger, we can safely assume that there is something wrong in society. So when a woman destroys the life of her unborn child, it is an evidence, either by education or circumstances, that she has been greatly wronged." Feminism was born of abolition. All people are equal. All choices are not. We envision a better day when motherhood is celebrated, when mothers are supported, when fathers are honored, and every child is cherished. And if you too refuse to choose between women and children, if you work to systematically eliminate the root causes that drive women to abortion, then you already follow in the footsteps of Susan B. Anthony and our other great, remarkable pro-life feminist foremothers, whether you call yourself a feminist or not. March 4th.